This is mafia, a word that can turn friends into targets in an instant. But what exactly is it? What does it mean when someone calls you a mafia? How did this word go from being a simple term for organized crime to a common insult? To understand how something can go from a mere name to a universal threat, we need to look at where it came from. But before we take a trip through time, let's first break down what the mafia actually means. Because there are different definitions depending on who you ask and when you ask them. The Italian-American writer Mario Puzo defined the mafia as a secret society of Sicilian criminals who live by a code of honor, bound together by blood ties and oaths of secrecy. The mafia was made up of both large families who had been wealthy for generations and poor peasants who were pushed to the edge by their circumstances. They created a new identity for themselves based on the concept of camorra, which refers to a criminal gang or association. Camorra also comes from the Sicilian word mafiu, meaning a powerful, dominating force. Thus, mafia was born. But if you ask anyone on the street today, they'll tell you that mafia has nothing to do with Sicily or Italy at all. It's an insult. It's a curse. It's what you call someone who just won't stop talking. And it could any be further from the truth because the mafia has been around since the 19th century. Sicily was ruled by the House of Savoy from 1861 to 1946. And these rulers were absolutely awful. King Victor Emmanuel II cared more about oppressing his people than helping them. So many Sicilians turned to the mafia for help. Now, while it's true that the mafia didn't start out as a criminal organization, they quickly became one. The mob protected landowners from paying taxes, kidnapped people for ransom, and generally spread fear throughout the island. But things really took off after World War II when the U.S. became involved. You see, the U.S. government was so impressed with how well the mafia worked that they brought members over to America to help them fight organized crime. And if you think that sounds like a bad idea, you're not wrong. But it happened anyway. So now that we know where the mafia came from, let us get back to the present day and explore how something so serious could become such a casual insult. One of the most famous movies ever made about the mafia is The Godfather. This film introduced the world to the Corleone family, one of the most feared and respected families in the mafia, but it also gave us one of the most iconic quotes in cinematic history. "I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse." While this line has become synonymous with The Godfather, it wasn't actually spoken in the movie at all. Instead, it was written down in the script as simply an offer. But when Marlon Brando ad-libbed the line, it stuck. And soon enough, everyone was using it to describe any kind of persuasion tactic. In fact, the entire movie helped to popularize the term mafia in America. Before The Godfather, the general public knew very little about organized crime. But after seeing how it operated on screen, people began using mafia as a way to describe any kind of criminal activity. Of course, this wasn't always accurate, but people didn't care. They just liked the sound of the word. It wasn't long before the mafia became a household name. Everyone from police officers to politicians to everyday citizens were using the word to describe anything related to organized crime. And while this was flattering for those actually involved in the mafia, it also made it harder for them to operate. After all, if everyone knew what they were doing, it made it easier for law enforcement to catch them in the act. But the mafia weren't going to let this get in their way. They simply adapted and began using the term mafia as a way to describe themselves. It was a way to show that they knew what was going on and that they were part of something bigger than themselves. It also helped to create a sense of community among mafia members. After all, if everyone is using the term mafia, then why shouldn't they? But while the mafia may have embraced the term, it hasn't exactly been used as a compliment. In fact, it's usually quite the opposite. People use the word mafia to describe anyone who is involved in illegal activities, no matter how big or small. It doesn't matter if you're rerunning a multi-million-dollar drug empire or just parking your car in a handicapped spot. If someone catches you in the act, they might call you a mafia. Of course, this isn't always appropriate. Calling someone a mafia when they've committed a serious crime is understandable. But calling someone a mafia for something small and petty is just rude. And that's exactly what's happening more and more often. These days, people use the word mafia to describe anyone who is annoying them, regardless of whether or not that person has actually done anything illegal. For example, let's say you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off. In this situation, it's natural to feel angry and insulted. But if you call that driver a mafia, you're taking it too far. After all, that person didn't commit a crime. It just made a mistake. Another example is when someone is talking too loudly or playing music too loudly, and you ask them to quiet down. If they refuse, you might call them a mafia. Again, this is taking it too far. Just because someone is being inconsiderate doesn't mean they're a criminal, and yet that's exactly what's happening. More and more people are using the word mafia as a way to express their anger, even when there is no real crime involved. And this is a problem for a few reasons. First, it trivializes the term mafia when everyone is using it to describe everything from loud talkers to people who cut them off in traffic. It makes it harder for people to take the mafia seriously. Second, it creates a false sense of security. If everyone thinks that calling someone a mafia is just a funny way to express their anger, then they may not take action when they should. For example, if you see someone speeding down the road, you might call them a mafia instead of reporting their license plate to the police. And third, it creates a hostile environment. When people are constantly using the word mafia as an insult, it creates a sense of fear and distrust. People will be less likely to work together and more likely to point the finger at each other. So what can we do to stop this trend? Well, for starters, we can be more mindful of our language. Just because everyone is doing it doesn't mean it's right. We also need to be more aware of the power of words. Words have the ability to influence how we think and behave. So if we're constantly using words like mafia in a negative way, it's going to create a negative environment. Finally, we need to be more forgiving. Everyone makes mistakes. So the next time someone cuts you off in traffic or talks too loudly on the bus, try not to take it personally. Remember that they're probably not trying to make your life miserable. They're just like you. Trying to get from point A to point B. Don't stories like this remind you of just how important language is in shaping our world? Words have power, and the way we use them can either bring people together or tear them apart. It's a responsibility that comes with language, and one that we must all take seriously. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the origins of other commonly misused words and phrases, please stay tuned for more content. Your support helps us continue exploring the fascinating world of language.